like to sometimes switch up from potato and get creative and use something like celery root or parsnip to get more creative with the root vegetables that we use. So while those boil, we'll get started on the prep for our sweet potatoes. These are beautiful large sweet potatoes, seasonal around now, harvested pretty much this week from my friend's farm.
Mom just happened to have a celery root, so you can see what it looks like.
So when we do the sweet potato, we're not going to boil these. So after these are peeled, we can go straight into the grating process.
Chef Noah?
Yes.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
This is big. People are like, they fight over whether or not to grate the potato by hand or put it in a food processor.
So I am a fan of the by hand method. I find that most of the machines don't give you the rustic kind of, I guess, shapes that you get from doing it by hand. You get some, most of them do a little bit of a thinner grate, and you don't get the variety of sizes and shapes that you usually do when doing it by hand on a grater. And the best part of the latkes for most of us is those really crispy and craggly edges around the outside. And doing it by hand gives you that variety of grated sizes that kind of hang off the sides.
Got it. Okay. And right now you said boiling. Are you boiling potatoes in that pot?
I'm boiling some of the white potatoes as we speak.
And that pulls the starch out?
That will pull the starch out, yes.
Really?
So what we're going to do is convert a little bit of that into a cooked potato, but we're not going to cook it all the way. The instructions in the recipe has this boil for only about 10 minutes till it's just fork tender. So it's sort of almost a half-cooked potato at that point, which lets you get a little bit of a fluffier texture inside of your potato latke.
Noah, why aren't the sweet potatoes boiled also?
Because they get too soft too quick. Boiled sweet potatoes tend to get a little bit too soft for this method. While using the cheese pumpkin, though, we're going to use about a quarter of a cheese pumpkin. This was a pretty good sized pumpkin that I grew in my backyard. You can see it's full of seeds and has a good fleshy inside.
A regular pumpkin.
Approximately 1.5 pounds or so, 2 pounds. But we're going to remove all the seeds and peel this as well. So I'll go ahead and take a chunk of this pumpkin off.
Do you want me to switch to the cheese pumpkin?
If you grate this sweet potato,
And so we'll go ahead and scrape some of this out as well.
Any scraps will go into the chickens. They're very happy.
chickens in also.
And in an effort to make it a little bit easier on peeling, we're going to quarter this quarter of a cheese pumpkin. Filleting out some of the seeds just because it has a softer texture to it, which increases the water content. And we would like to have a drier pumpkin to mix in with our eggs and absorb a little bit of the flour.
Chef.
Yes.
You mentioned something about flour. What happens, and I know your mom is a gluten-free person over there, right?
So the recipe that we've included for the latkes today basically are using an all-purpose flour, but we've done a little bit of playing and experimenting and have found that it also works really well with a gluten-free substitute, as well as one of my favorite substitute flours, especially for fried foods, chickpea flour works really well, especially with the pumpkin, which uses a little bit of a garam masala spice. So it has some of these Asian or Indian ingredients, if you would.
Great.
Peeling the cheese pumpkin is pretty easy, especially if you could break it down into manageable pieces like this. So I probably planted only like 2 or 3 cheese pumpkin plants and ended up with about a dozen of these cheese pumpkins this side. So they were very prolific, very easy to grow. The only thing about growing the cheese pumpkin that I recommend is that it does tend to spread and take up a lot of space.
It does. And with the cheese pumpkins that we've gotten so far, I've broken them down, I've roasted them in big pieces, and I stuck them in the freezer. So we'll have some nice cheese pumpkin soup going all through winter. It's easy to process and just put it away. And if anybody wants to grow some cheese pumpkins, we'll be happy to save you some seeds because they're that easy to grow. We'll dry them and we'll send them to you. And we're going to see Long Island bountiful with our native pumpkin, the Long Island cheese pumpkin.
I believe I got the seeds for the cheese pumpkin originally from a slow food gift box from an event that we had been participating in.
We did, because the Long Island cheese pumpkin was a product that we highlighted a few years ago when we had Cheese Pumpkin Festival. So a lot of things were tied around to the Long Island cheese pumpkin, the Long Island Cheese Pumpkin Project. More stuff for the chickens.
So now we're going to start to grate our potatoes and our onions. Potatoes and onions, the backbone of a lot of Jew food. I'm not sure I could give you the real reason for that. I'm going to assume it's because it's plentiful, easily accessible,
Cheap.
and relatively cheap. And the reason we eat latkes at Hanukkah month?
Well, we eat latkes to celebrate the miracle of oil, to light the candle in sort of like an oil lamp in the candle, in the oil lamp in the temple for one night. And the miracle of Hanukkah was there was enough oil to last for 8 nights. So we celebrate for 8 nights and we eat a lot of fried foods. So Noah, what was my first request for you when I ever asked you to make latkes for us? Do you remember?
I do not remember.
Because I'm always such a health conscious person, I said to him, can we not fry them and bake them? And I've been giving him health advice about food for years, and he looked at me and said, I draw the line. Latkes have to be fried. You cannot bake them, and that's just the way it is. Get over yourself. You're going to eat fried food one night. And we never had the conversation again, and every year we do fry our latkes. So
there is a way to bake, especially these days with the air fryers. If you did want to try to drizzle these with oil and air fry them on the healthier side, it's workable. They're nowhere near as good.
nowhere near as good. I have to agree with that.
I've got my onions peeled, I've got my squash peeled, I've got my sweet potatoes peeled, and my white potatoes cooking. I think it's time to start grating. So I've got a couple of bowls set up here for my grated potatoes and pumpkin. And I have my recipes here for everybody that will be included with the link at the end of the segment. This is the part it's important to make sure you really feel the onion and how it embraces you. It's okay to shed a tear. Woo. If you have a moment, please log on and donate now.
So we're using a lot of the things that I had in my house. My bowls, my forks, and I'm a big believer in buying local. That's part of our slow food motto, is good, clean, and fair, and supporting local. And I do as much as I can. But I have to say sometimes I just can't buy local. And I will admit it, even though I'm chair of slow food, I'm crying ridiculously. I do go to Amazon. But you know what you can do? You can become a supporter of Slow Food East End if you log on to Amazon Prime Smile. And from there, you can designate Slow Food East End as a charity, and 5% of all your sales will come back to us. So I just signed up a few weeks ago, and I hate to tell you how much 5% is, but I put a lot into that slow food kitty so far. Every little bit helps. And what we do with the money, why we're asking for donations, why we're asking you to donate to Slow Food and sign up for the charity or buy our holiday box is because we have a big vision. And last year, when the COVID crisis hit, a lot of people were affected in our community, and we needed to figure out and step up what we can do to help. So we started a local resilience grant, and we gave $15,000 to local food producers. We gave about $10,000 to local food pantries. We gifted a lot of our local restaurants. Everyone was really hit. And we don't know what this year looks like, but we already know that people need our help. So your donations will go a long way tonight. And anyone who donates tonight will automatically be entered in a raffle for our holiday basket. So you get to win double. By giving to this great organization, Noah has donated his time and food. I'm going to tell you quite honestly, these latkes won't go to waste. They will be eaten right afterwards. But thank you for being part of Slow Food. And that's why my gorgeous grandson is going around with the Donate Now sign. And there'll be a link where you can go directly to our website, and all donations are appreciated.
Good call, Mom. Please support Slow Food. They've supported a lot of other organizations that were in need through this time of crisis. So
no, even though that I am vegan, we can talk a little bit. I'd like to highlight something that Noah and Slow Foodies Fans worked together. We were donating to CAST, and we were giving them money, and we also asked, what do people really need now? And donations were generous, and they were getting a lot of canned food and dried food and things like that. And they said, people really want a hot meal. People really want a protein. And at that time, the restaurant was closed. So Noah's walk-in and all that was fairly empty. So through the help of one of Noah's purveyors, through using his refrigerator, through our donation, we bought like 600? About 600 chickens that were donated to local people in the community so they could get a hot meal. So we all work together, all our restaurants, different organizations we partner together to make Slow Food a reality. Our Good, Clean, Fair concept open for everyone. So,
yeah, donating to Slow Food is a great cause because they've helped out a lot of other great causes. So we've grated our Long Island cheese pumpkin and added in our grated onion. We've grated our sweet potato and added in some grated onion. For our cheese pumpkin latkes, we're going to be using a little bit of green onion. And for our sweet potato, we're going to use the bottom of those green onions. So here I have some scallions, about a quarter cup in each one. 3 or 4 scallions should do. So greens will go into our cheese pumpkin, and we'll use the whites in our sweet potato latke. And then we'll start grating the whites, white potatoes, that is. So thin slices on the scallions, roughly a quarter cup or a couple of tablespoons.
We believe no part of the vegetable goes to waste.
If you're going to use the greens, you're going to use the whites somewhere. Now we can grate our white potatoes. So you can see that this is sort of partially cooked here, where the outside starch is softer and the inside still pretty raw. Which means when we wring these out, which is going to be the next step, there'll be a little bit less water to wring out of this cooked potato than a fresh potato. And the only thing I recommend before this process is leaving yourself enough time to cool these potatoes so that they're easy to handle. White potatoes in there. We can start to wring these guys out. So we'll dump our squash and onions all into a towel like this and bundle it up into a little pouch and just give it a good wring. My favorite memories of Hanukkah were spending time in the kitchen with my grandmother, making potato latkes, pretty much just like this, by hand. And I'm pretty sure every Hanukkah, I went back to school with a grated knuckle.
Noah would also volunteer his grandmother to come every year to bring latkes to class. Because he knew Mom wasn't doing it, but Grandma couldn't say no to that. So every year she made a batch for at least one classroom and brought the latkes in for the holiday. So Noah, for those vegans out there, Mom has done a little research on not using egg.
Yes.
So for those of you who don't do egg, and you're a little familiar with vegan cooking, you could use something called aquafaba. And aquafaba, if you ever got a can of chickpeas and drain the liquid out of a can of chickpeas, that's aquafaba. And you would use about 2 tablespoons or so in that. Or you could make an egg out of ground flaxseed, which is about a tablespoon of flaxseed to about 3 tablespoons of liquid, almond milk, oat milk, or water. And that will act as a binder like the egg does.
Sure. And also for vegans, you can also cook your potatoes a little bit farther, which kind of creates its own binder. And then I have heard that almond flour creates a good substitute for the egg in there if you have a more cooked potato.
All right, we're going to try
So
that.
this is about the consistency what we're looking for, where the flour is just sort of binding together the liquid. It's pretty loose, but has enough starchiness consistency to hold together in its cake form. We're going to do this, repeat this process with both the sweet potato and the regular potato. Get all the liquid out of here. Good wringing. Back in bowl. Back in bowl. Egg, flour, repeat. You might notice that I'm not seasoning this at this point with any salt and pepper. While cooking potato latkes, I like to use my seasoning at the end, just so that you really taste the seasoning that you've added to it. And we are not releasing any of the water from the potato or the onions with the salt content starting to pull that out. So you can see that my sweet potato is a little bit drier than my squash. So we're going to add 1 more egg and a little flour. So I have my regular onions, my scallions, my egg, my sweet potato, my flour. And now we're starting to get to the latke or pancake consistency that we're looking for. Just enough starch from the egg and flour to bind our ingredients. In this bowl that we have our potatoes and onions grated into, we're gonna do a little bit of diced chilies, just for a little bit of heat.
And because I love spicy food.
You could do this on a mandolin or a thin slicer. You could also do a dice or a chop in a food processor if you wanted a different consistency. We're gonna add our chilies.
You keep the seeds in.
I keep the seeds in because I like the heat. You could change that on your own. We're gonna go with our egg. And a 1/2 cup flour.
So you're using about 2 eggs per batch?
I am. The recipe that I gave everybody is a good starting point. It all is going to vary just a little bit on the size of your potato and the size of your egg, obviously. So what you're looking for is a moist but not too wet consistency, so that you don't have too much spatter when you start to drop your latkes into the hot oil.
Chef Noah?
Yeah.
Someone asked a question. Looks like Nancy asked a question. What about using spaghetti squash raw or cooked part way?
Yes, spaghetti squash would not be the best substitute for this recipe. I believe in the recipe I included possible substitutions of other hard winter squashes like a butternut. A spaghetti squash would probably have a little bit too much water content in it for this. One more onion for our potato latkes. Don't cry, Mom, it's okay.
I'm stepping away.
And finish this potato. And make sure we wring out all of our ingredients.
Great. Good job.
And so now we pretty much have the base for our 3 different latkes prepared. Our traditional white potato, our Long Island cheese pumpkin, and our sweet potato. So in just a moment, we'll move these over to the fryer. We're using some thick, large black cast iron pans. Heavy duty 12-inch would work perfectly.
And what kind of oil are you using, Noah?
Today we're using a canola oil.
Why?
The canola oil is a light neutral oil that takes a high heat point and doesn't impart a lot of flavor. You could use any other oil, nut or seed, that could take a high smoke point. Something like an avocado oil works well, as long as it has a relatively neutral flavor. So we have our 3 pans for our 3 different types of latkes. We're gonna go ahead and use a little bit of this canola oil. I did not include an amount of oil in my recipe. We're frying here, people. But we're pan frying, we're not deep frying. So we're not filling this pan with oil. We're having enough oil rather to coat the pan and maybe have a little bit of lift in there, a centimeter or something. We can add more oil as needed.
Somebody asked, Chef, can you use a regular green zucchini?
You can use a regular zucchini. You can pretty much use almost any vegetable you want. You're gonna wring a lot of liquid out of a fresh green summer squash versus a hard winter squash. So just be cautious when you wring that out to really wring out as much liquid as possible. And you would probably also have to adjust your proportion or ratio of egg to flour.
So what's the difference between making, if it was with zucchini, I would call it a fritter.
Well, essentially a latke is a pancake. So it's a flat, if it was Indian, it'd be a pakora.
That's
if
true.
it was American, it'd be a fritter.
Right, okay.
If it's Jewish, it's a latke.
It's a latke. It's a latke.
So we're gonna let this get up to, till it's just starting to shimmer. We don't really want to bring it up to a high smoke point. And the good thing about using these thick black cast iron pans is they retain a lot of heat. So after we drop our potato latkes, we won't really have to adjust the heat on these too much. If you're not lucky enough, or if your kitchen is not stocked enough to have one of these heavy cast iron pans, a non-stick would work well. Just be cautious as you adjust that heat, because it just tends to not be as even in something not as thick as this.
And if you don't have a cast iron, those look like they weigh about 100 pounds.
These weigh about 100 pounds a piece.
Yeah, I can imagine. If you don't have cast iron, what do you suggest? Stainless steel, is that?
A stainless steel pan works as long as you make sure you get it to the right temperature, or a non-stick in this case might be a decent option.
Okay.
So now that we've got our pans getting pretty hot, I think we'll start with our regular traditional potato latke first. Got our chilies, onions, potato, eggs, flour. We have our salt and pepper for after these guys get fried. We're gonna just go ahead and use about a handful for each latke. It's about a palmful, and it's free form. I'm not using a scoop or anything because I really don't wanna create a ball. I like all the little pieces that kind of separate and fry on the outside.
I love those burnt little edges. I wish this was smell-o-vision and you could all smell it. This is really smelling so delicious. Smells like a Jewish house.
While we have our white potato latkes frying, we'll move on and start to do our pumpkin. This is the cheese pumpkin. And it's the same, it's a little handful, approximately a quarter cup or so. And your batter or mix should have just enough flour in it to bind these ingredients together. Now that's got the cheese pumpkin latkes frying, we'll move on and do a few of our sweet potatoes. So I know we're not supposed to be having company right now, but if you have some family that's all in the same household, you could invite them all downstairs or to the kitchen and do a variety of latkes and celebrate your Hanukkah together. It's a good time, and get your kids involved, get your family involved. If somebody doesn't have a bloody knuckle, you're not doing it right.
There's a question. Do they all cook for approximately the same time?
They do cook for approximately the same time, but as the chef, you need to keep an eye on it, because in my recipe, I included instructions for about 2 minutes per side, but your squashes might not be the same as my pumpkin, and your pumpkin might not be the same, or my potato and your potato may not be the same, and different potatoes have different starch content, and so you just want to keep an eye on them and watch them as they start to cook. Here on my regular potato latke, we could keep an eye on the edges and start to monitor the color around the outside of that and start to see that we're getting some browning. And when this has another 30 seconds or so on it, we're going to turn that one over. So this is our regular potato latke that's starting to get good color. You can see with these heavy non-sticks and just the right temperature, this heavy cast iron pan, that it pretty much creates a non-stick surface. Once the potato starts to get some color on it, it pretty much just releases. You want to cook this on a nice medium heat. If the heat's a little bit low, when you drop your potato latkes in, it starts to soak up some oil and you'll get a little bit of a greasier product. So make sure your temperature is at the right, your oil's at the right temperature before you get started. And you can see now we're getting really nice color on these guys.
While they fry, I'd like to ask, is Mimi on the call tonight? Laura?
I don't see Mimi.
Okay, so Laura, I'm going to ask you to just speak for a moment on, and can you tell everyone listening exactly what the Arc of Taste program is in Slow Food?
So the Arc of Taste is a catalog that is it's a Slow Food international catalog of heritage and indigenous and foods that are potentially could be on the verge of extinction. It could be foods that maybe just aren't being consumed because I'll give you an example. Our beloved Long Island cheese pumpkin is on the Arc of Taste. And the reason that the Long Island cheese pumpkin is on the Arc of Taste is because back during the industrial times, the rounder pumpkins were more favorable because in those times where fast food, it was a time where food processing and getting food to the public was something that they wanted to get there readily and fast. So rounder varieties were more preferable. So when you look at a Long Island cheese pumpkin, for example, it's squat, it looks like a wheel of cheese, and it doesn't taste like cheese, of course, but it's just not, it's cumbersome back in those days when they would roll them off conveyor belts. So what had happened is due to mass production of food, and particularly pumpkins, this rounder variety became more popular. And because of that, this squat Long Island cheese pumpkin became regulated to a porch, your porch, for example, during Halloween, and nobody was even eating them. And more tragically, the seeds for the Long Island cheese pumpkin had disappeared on seed catalogs, for example. So back in the 1970s, Ken Ettlinger, who is a seed saver, who is local to Long Island, would go out, his mom during Thanksgiving would have him go out and forage for the cheese pumpkin, because it was very difficult to find, but it was the farmers, the local farmers, that would grow the cheese pumpkin. And it was because of those, the farmers actually, you know, they're part of, with Ken, that really saved this variety. So those seeds, he met with another seed breeder, you know, got wind that he was saving these seeds from Maryland, and he was growing out the pumpkin, particularly for seed catalogs. And so that is how eventually the cheese pumpkin became back into market, if you will. But the reason it's, again, the reason that it is on the Ark of Taste is because people weren't eating the pumpkin. And when we don't eat things, especially when we talk about in terms of biodiversity, people won't grow them. So the Ark of Taste preserves these histories. It preserves heritage recipes. It also has to do with heritage breeds, plants, of course. And it's a catalog, again, it's a living catalog that is always being updated and refined, because as you know, and as we know, the stories of food tend to change. We try to get the stories as best as we can. And I wish Mimi Edelman was here, because she is the co-chair of the Ark of Taste for the Northeast. So I'm speaking basically on her behalf. But this is a living catalog, and there's thousands and thousands of varieties. And
There are.
yeah, thousands of varieties. And we nominate varieties to go onto the Ark of Taste. Like, for example, the Peconic Bay Scallop is now on the Ark of Taste because of, and as we know, us Long Islanders, who is from Long Island on this call, the Bay Scallop did not have a good season this year. And that's—
We're going to cut over to the latke frying.
Go ahead, go back. But that's
Thank
the
you,
Ark of
Laura.
Taste.
And also, just a little aside, another product in our box, the salty sea salt, the spicy sea salt, is African fish pepper, which supposedly came over the seeds sewed in the cloth of the slaves' garments that they had on. So we're featuring that in our box as well. And the latkes smell so delicious. I think you can smell it everywhere on the East End. How are we doing with the latkes, Chef Noah?
Great, thanks. Our white potato latkes are just coming to a nice GBD. Chef talk for golden brown and delicious.
Oh, that's a new one on me.
We have our cheese pumpkin, which is now starting to resemble a latke. And we have our sweet potatoes. I like the extra crispy variety.
I do too.
So we're going to leave these in our oil for just another moment or so. We're going to an elevated rack on just to drain out some of the oil. At that point, you could let your latkes sit for a little while, or even pop them in a low oven, or reheat them at a later date if need be. So we've got this great color here on our white potato latkes. They're looking like extra crispy potato pancakes. As soon as they all have some really nice color like this, we'll go ahead and take them out, let them drain. We're going to do the same with our pumpkin.
Can you freeze the sausage?
Can you freeze latkes?
You can freeze these and save them for reheating at a later date. Obviously, you know, the idea is celebrating with family and enjoying them right out of the pan while they're hot. But yes, they do freeze and they do save okay.
Because it is a Schwartz tradition to really cook too much food. So it doesn't matter how many people we have coming over. We usually cook for 3 times that amount. So I'm sure we have frozen them at some point.
Also, one of my chef problems is that I forget how to cook for a small group.
Oh, that's very true. He comes with mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving like he was feeding the restaurant.
So we have pretty much our latkes at this point ready to platter and serve. We've got our 3 varieties. We've got our pumpkin, our sweet potato, and our regular potato. Regular potato with chili, our sweet potato with scallion whites, and our pumpkin with scallion greens, and a little bit of garam masala.
Come over here and play.
I am. We're gonna bring these over to our island here, and we'll go ahead and make an assortment.
And I still want to show you our lovely box that if you donate to us tonight, you will automatically be in a raffle. And just so you know, the box sells for $75 and shipping is included. And we'll ship it anywhere you want. Again, the Long Island cheese pumpkin, honey, right from my very own farm here in the back called the Happy Herbalist. We have wine glasses, spicy sea salt, and spicy pumpkin seeds. So it's a beautiful gift. It really is. Comes really pretty. The value is $75. Well, I don't know. The value is priceless. What can I tell
Invaluable.
you? Invaluable. Priceless, but it's delicious. That's what I know. So we hope you partake of it. Okay, back to latkes.
So we plattered our latkes. I'd like to garnish them with a little bit of sliced chives, serving them with a little bit of sour cream. I've got a cabbage sour cream from Vermont. Mom has prepared a vegan sour cream. Doesn't that look yummy-ish?
Noah is a real fan. What can I tell you? I've included the recipe in your recipe pack for vegan sour cream. And this is fresh applesauce that I made, unsweetened applesauce with apples from Wickham's farm here in Cutchogue. And we just love Wickham's apples.
And then for a little bit of color on our platter, I have a little bit of microgreens. These are micro beet green. I usually garnish with a little bit of chopped chives for some more color too. These are grown in a greenhouse locally all year long actually, but they add a nice color to our platter. And now you've got Hanukkah potato latkes ready to serve. Thanks, Mom.
Amazing.
Hope everybody enjoyed our cooking demonstration.
We have some questions. You're
Yes,
not
questions,
we
too.
have some questions. All right. Someone has a question. Do you get rid of more oil if you drain on paper towels?
I don't know if you really do absorb more oil if you drain on a paper towel. Part of me wants to say that the paper towel ends up absorbing a little bit of the oil and then the latke just ends up sitting in it.
Okay. And here's another question. How would you reheat? Air fryer, oven?
I would oven, or if you have the air fryer, just the convection bake setting on the air fryer is plenty. If you have convection in your oven, having the fan on will definitely help keep them crispy.
All right, we're having our official.
Seasoning. There's a question on seasoning. Did I miss when you season? Do you do salt, pepper?
I
Question.
do salt and pepper when I take them out of the oil, yes. Just salt, just pepper, right on the outside only.
You got chubby.
The grandson thinks it's good. It's good. I can approve.
And now everyone wants to know if you can ship to all different places, Canada, Alaska.
I'll ship. Well, thanks everybody. Any other questions?
Anyone else have any other questions?
Noah, thank you. It was delicious. The only problem is we didn't get the taste.
Can everybody?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone unmute and say hello and.
Well, I just want to close out.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Pennie.
Thank you. I know.
I just want to end.
I'm gonna have latkes for
Close it.
Where's the recipe?
Thank you. There will be a link, providing a link to recipes, and you can go to our website as well. But I want to thank you all for being on board tonight. We're looking forward to a great year next year for Slow Foodie Sends, with a lot more exciting things going on, a lot more opportunities to give to the community, and a lot more opportunities to make Slow Food East End a real foundation for the East End community. And donate now. So happy Hanukkah. We wish you all the best holiday season. Happy New Year. We love you all. I appreciate
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Christmas. Hi, Paul.
Happy
Better than
holidays, everyone.
anything that on the Schwartz.
Happy Schwartzes.
Where do we get the recipe? Where do we get the recipe?
Where can we get the recipe?
Thank you.
You're going to be loading it on the website. You're going to get it on the website.
Loading,
Okay.
they're loading it on the
Thanks,
website.
Chef Noah.
What's the wine pairing?
Can you hear me?
Chef
The
Noah
wine
wants
The wine pairing would be like a light Riesling from the North Fork, or Gewürztraminer might be a little too heavy, or a very stainless steel unoaked Chardonnay. Sauvignon Blanc is too aromatic, it would overpower it. But what I really want is, I need a picture of Ron and Noah holding up the platter.
Wait a minute. The website is going to be. Wait, the
So much
website
better
is going
than
to
Spritz.
be
Recipes.
Oh, here we go.
Slow Food East End .org. Slow
SLOWEASTEND.
Eastern? EES?
Yeah, EAS.
Next, I want a recipe on how to make checkerboards cake. That was my favorite.
Penny's gone. Cool.
Oh, everybody's leaving. So anyway, have a good night, everybody. Thank you for
Happy holidays.
Yeah. Thank you for the latkes. I'm going to make them soon.